My name is Katie Sardinha, and I'm a third-generation tree fruit orchardist in Summerland, British Columbia, Canada. On May 21st, 2025, I hosted an event which consisted of a talk followed by an open mic community brainstorming session. The topic of the event was Reshaping Our Food System, how retailer consolidation in Canada imperils food production and what we can do about it. The event was filmed so that it could be shared. The information in this talk is really potent shit. So enjoy the video.
All right. Hello,
and
everyone.
Join the movement.
Welcome. I'm very, very happy to be here and see all of you. It's kind of emotional seeing many of you, like you're very important people to me. The caliber of people in this room is very high. So hopefully we can have a really cool discussion. I'm probably gonna just carry this around. Okay, so the thesis of this talk is that basically in Canada, food production doesn't pay. And I think that people are, at this point in time, really aware of the fact that they're being gouged at the grocery store by the fact that there are a handful of companies that are in charge of a whole grocery retail market. But my impression from so many conversations is that people don't understand that farmers are also being gouged. And there's good reasons why that information hasn't been kind of made available yet. And I'll go a little bit into that, though I don't want to dwell too much on the past. But I do want to kind of begin to inspire our conversation about the farmer side of this problem, because I really think that that's the crucial kind of missing piece. Then when we have this whole story, we can really understand how important it is that we deal with this problem. Personally, I kind of have been trying to figure out what the main problems are in agriculture over time. I feel like there's some really large all-encompassing problems that kind of cause other problems, and then those cause other problems. But basically, if you can fix the big all-encompassing problems, a lot of other problems go away. And I've become convinced over time that retailer consolidation is that kind of mother problem of all the daughter problems. And if we can fix this problem, we can really make a lot of other problems go away. So that's probably, that's the point. So in Canada, we have, there are 3 Canadian companies that account for about 2/3 of the entire grocery retail market. That is Loblaws, Empire, and Metro. If you add in Costco and Walmart, that's about 80 to 85% of the grocery retail market. So that's a very few companies in charge of everything. So that's a really big, in my opinion, largest driving causal force behind the fact that production doesn't pay in Canada. And basically, one of the things I'm going to talk about later on is how, and this is where the farmer's perspective comes in, in order to survive in this situation with this imbalanced market, we farmers have been enacting a whole bunch of different strategies, making a bunch of decisions, and those decisions themselves, most of them, are themselves in the long term undermining our food security as well. So we're just causing more and more problems, and it's because we're avoiding the main problem. We're working around it. So one of the main things I want to do in the next 2 hours, I want everybody in the room to walk with me, and even if you don't otherwise believe so, I want you to pretend at least that you believe that we can fix this problem. Okay? This is a mindset shift because currently the belief is that the way things are is inevitable, it's too big, we can't do anything about it, and so we just have to adapt to the situation. But actually, I don't believe this is true. I think that this is actually a fixable problem, and I really like the odds, because if we can all realize that we're all being screwed in multiple ways by this issue, then we can come together and act collectively to fix it. And so most of this today is going to be talking about how we can actually do that. Okay. So I'm going to talk for about 45 minutes. I'm hoping, maybe more, maybe less. And then after that, I'm going to switch over to this community brainstorm, where I just we'll have an open mic, and you're free to talk, share, ask questions, react, share ideas. And I'm going to share this online, this presentation. I'll have the list of resources I've drawn upon in order to, in preparation for the talk. If I say anything that's factually incorrect, I'm really trying not to. I'm really trying to express everything truthful here. If I do say something incorrect, let me know and I will post corrections, that sort of thing, because I really want this to be a resource that we can draw upon. Okay, before I move on, I do want to do a land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. And this is important because as we're moving into the future with climate change wreaking havoc increasingly, we are going to be moving some of our agriculture indoors and under glass, and that's a good thing. We should do that. But not all of it is going to move that way. We are still going to rely on soil-based agriculture. The sunlight is what plants eat, and it's free. And the soil is sacred and this extremely complex and amazing ecosystem. So we're still going to rely on soil-based agriculture for a lot of our crops. And it really is important that we pay attention to what Indigenous people know about the particular landscapes that they have lived on for generations and generations, because there's a lot of knowledge there. And we can benefit from that. And I think farmers and Indigenous people are natural allies. And this is the gully outside of my farm, and that's Giantside Mountain. Okay, a little bit about me and how I got here. Here's some pictures of my fruit ranch, Glasgow Fruit Ranch, in different seasons and different types of trees. These are all apple trees here. I was born technically in Vancouver, but I grew up in Summerland. We on my parents' 10-acre apple farm. And it was a lovely childhood. They never forced me into farming. I did work on cherry orchards growing up. But when I went to UBC, Vancouver, and I studied cognitive systems and anthropology. And I fell in love there with the work I was doing, which was work with Kwakwala, which is an Indigenous language spoken on the central coast of BC. So I decided I wasn't done that, so then I went and did a master's and PhD at UC Berkeley. It was all in fellowship, I couldn't have paid for that. At the end of that, I decided to go back into farming. And it was essentially because I had seen the life that my parents led, and I thought that it was just beautiful and amazing, and I could tool that for the things that I wanted to do. I thought that I could be a farmer, and that would be my income, and I'd have this really meaningful work, really useful work, getting to be outside, joyful work. And then on the side, just volunteer, I could continue to work in language revitalization, and I'd have that balance that my parents appeared to have. And so while I did find joy in farming, I also found out that it is economically impossible to do this nowadays. That basically, so to put things in perspective, in the 5 years that we've officially had the orchard ourselves, me and my partner only once have achieved the amount of net revenue equivalent to if we had both had minimum wage jobs. So, and some years it's far worse than that. And, which is fine, in a sense, because we have certain privileges. We have our land, we have our houses, we grow our own food, so we can keep our own living costs low. So we're actually doing okay. But I would get these things. This is the TIPS reports. This is the Toward Increased Profits reports from the Ministry of Agriculture. Very helpful documents. Love it. Very grateful. And these reports basically, they compare your farm to other farms in your category, and they tell you kind of how well you're doing. And these reports were telling me that I was doing awesome. And it was telling me that I was doing awesome essentially for these reasons that I told you, that we kind of could keep our costs low, and the fact that we were doing all our own work. And what this made me feel was this sort of empathetic kind of horror. Sort of like, if I'm doing well, you know, how's everybody else doing? Like, and that's what caused me a lot of stress. It's been that combined with climate change, really like made me feel a lot of stress. So I started to ask and pay attention and try to figure out, okay, what's going on? Why is there no money in producing food? I guess some more background on just what we do. I mean, we basically work all around the year to produce our apples. There's a little bit more downtime in the winter. We're pruning trees and we're planning for the next season and that sort of thing. And then we have a really, really busy season from like April till the beginning of November. But we are working all year to produce. And there's a lot of expertise that goes just into production. And this is the way that farms used to be. They used to be basically experts in production who would then pass on the produce to other players to deal with it, to sell it, to market, to pack it, and everything like that. It's this type of farm that I'm talking about that I want to defend as a really important type of farm to have within a food system. And it's this type of farm, this farm that focuses on producing a lot, that is imperiled by retailer consolidation. That's all I want to say. Okay, so as I was looking around and trying to figure out what is going on, why is this so difficult to make any money, I came across a couple of alarming trends, more than this, but I'm only going to share two. First off is that young people in Canada are struggling to take up and continue farming. So if you look at this graph, this is two different census years. We have 2016 and 2021. This is just showing you the age structure of the farming community. So 55 years and older is between 54 and 60% of farmers. Then the next we have 35 to 54, and then we have under 35, a very small percentage of farmers, between 8 and 9%. And this is just a graph. This doesn't tell you why this is happening. Something particularly disturbing that was commented on after the 2021 census is that young farmers are getting into farming and then dropping out. So we actually see a reduction in young farmers in these categories over time. The fact that this one is smaller than this one and this one is smaller than this one. And there's this question at the time, like, why are young farmers getting into farming and then quitting within 5 years? And when I heard that, I wasn't surprised, because, I mean, we were doing okay, but, you know, the empathetic horror. And I think burnout is a big part of it. Based on the conversations I was having, farmer burnout is a big thing. There's also land prices. I'm not going to talk more about this later on, but we should talk about it if you want to later. But land prices in farmland are a huge barrier for coming onto farmland, especially when food production doesn't pay and everybody knows it. People can't buy land at high prices if they know they're not going to make money growing food. They're not going to be able to do it. So land prices are a big part. Sorry, I have a forever cough. It's been like 6 weeks. Okay. The second alarming trend is that the proportion of food that is both produced and consumed locally is actually going down. And this really, really surprised me when I learned it, because we kind of see everywhere all the values. People really do care about buying locally, and it's talked about at all these different levels. I had always just assumed that we were kind of keeping pace. In BC, there's an estimate that we were producing and consuming 48% of our food in 2001. And by 2020, according to 2018 data, that was down to 34%. So it is difficult to do these measures. I'm sorry. I'm so dry. It's difficult to do these measures. There's a lot of things that go into them, like exporting, that sort of thing. But it's still really a clear trend downward and a fast trend downward. So that's alarming. This pattern is consistent with us outsourcing food production. So we use this term all the time in manufacturing.
is when we stop producing things here, we let other regions produce them for us. Some crops are being outsourced already, other ones are not. It's complicated because a lot of things that we do grow here we export. So in theory, we could bring them back and buy them here. But we'll talk about some obstacles later on about things that make that kind of difficult. But there is a degree to which we are outsourcing some of our food production, at least, to other regions of the world. So before going on, I want to talk about a couple of terms, just so that we're clear. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. We have a producer is someone who produces food, a farmer. I'm just calling this the middle layer. This is packing, storage, processing, distributing, and shipping. All the people that take our produce and do something with it. Oh, I'm suffering. Oh, he's got a cough. Thank you. Middle layer. Retailers, we know retailers sell, and then we have consumers, all of us, including farmers, having consumers as well. Wholesale is when producers sell in bulk to retailers via this middle layer. Direct sale is when producers sell directly to consumers. That's your farmers' markets. That's your farmers' markets and your fruit stands and etc. like that. And I'm going to mostly we'll talk about this later, but wholesale is where the vast majority of our food comes from. So I'm mostly going to be talking about that. And it's important that we talk about these two different types of price and have a name for them, because otherwise the word price is ambiguous. The farmgate price is the price that the producer receives. So producer, I get a price for my produce. The retail price is the price that the consumer pays at a retail outlet. So what you pay when you go to the grocery store. Obviously, in direct sales, consumers pay the farmgate price. Okay. A common assumption, a very common assumption, is that farmers' cost of production, what it takes in order to produce something, is related to the retail price of goods. Right? You mostly assume that. Like a spider and its shadow, there's this inherent relationship between these things. It cost me more to produce apples this year. Well, I should get a better price for it, and you should pay a little bit more. Is actually the idea. When the cost of production goes up, retail prices goes up. This is often used as a justification, by the way, for farmers to lower their cost of production. We're supposed to be becoming more and more efficient so that consumers can pay less at the grocery store. We have been becoming more and more efficient, but you guys are paying a lot more at the grocery store. And some very prominent people have been basically stating that this relationship does exist in public. For example, Sylvain Charlebois, the food professor, says this all the time. Why are you paying more at the grocery store? Well, it's the rising costs of production. CEO of Loblaws, Galen Weston, has said this. They have used this as an explanation for why people are paying more. Is it the case, though? So, in the journey of figuring out what was the problem, I went to the 134th BC Fruit Growers Association convention in 2023. And we had a presentation there by Professor Colleen Wiseman from UBC at the Department of Land and Food Systems. There we learned that in 2019, BC apple growers captured about 12% of the retail price. So for every dollar at the grocery store, on average, we received 12 cents. Out of context, that doesn't mean much, I know. But we also found that in that same year, or the same study span, I guess, Washington apple growers captured about 37% of the retail share for Red Delicious. and 50% for Honeycrisp of the retail price. And in general, and I don't have a graph for this, but I wish I did, in the USA, farmgate prices, what the farmer receives, generally correlate with retail prices. That up and down, that relationship we talked about. Whereas in Canada, that correlation doesn't hold. And I will show you some nice graphs. Basically, what this kind of shows is it's not just that we're competing with places that have lower costs of production, right? This is the story in the global marketplace. We're competing with other places. They're cheaper to produce, so our prices go down. Well, no, what this is actually pointing towards is that our competitors are being paid better than we are for the exact same thing. And why? Because the retailers here can get away with it. They're very, very big, and we are very, very small. And this power imbalance means that we can't negotiate effectively for price increases, at farmgate price increases. I did kind of want to mention, this kind of puts a little bit of a sick twist on the whole Buy Canadian movement, because when you're buying from these retailers, you're supporting the retailers, and it's like, yay, you're buying Canadian, so that's good, but also you're supporting these retailers who are really screwing us. So, a little bit twisted. Okay. This is the shape of the graph that I want you guys to look at. These graphs are from Kersey of the National Farmers Union, which has done a lot of research in this area. It is quite difficult to do this research because a lot of pricing info is proprietary and it is not available. These studies were done off of StatCan data sources when they exist, but there's a lot of complications. But what we're seeing is different commodity groups kind of finding the same thing. So what's the pattern? So we have down here, this is for wheat versus bread. So down here is the price, the farmgate price, what the farmer receives for their wheat. And you can see since the 80s up to 2021, not much difference. A little bit of fluctuation, not much difference though. Retail price for bread once it's been processed and sold goes steadily upwards, and there was a later extension of these graphs, and it goes precipitously upwards around COVID. Well, basically, retail price goes up, price that the farmer receives stays the same for 40 years. Okay, here is the same sort of pattern for hogs versus pork and bacon. So that's in pig's meat. Here we have another one in beef. So the farmer receives the price down here for cows. There's some ups and downs, but it basically is more or less the same. And this is the retail price, what the retailer is getting. And then down here again for corn. This is corn, pretty flatlined, and then it's corn flakes. So different commodity groups, sort of the same pattern is filtering in. There's the relationship between the farm gate price and the retailing price is not a good relationship, right? They are not correlated with each other. I also mentioned these graphs do not have the middle layer here, but I have seen the graphs that I've seen. Sometimes the middle layer, the tendency is for it to basically kind of track the one down here, the farmers, except get a little bit higher over time. And that's what we'd expect, because this middle layer is basically providing a service to producers. And they're basically, the retailer will pay them. Oh, this is on the next slide. Yeah, the retailer will pay them, and then they will give whatever's left to the producer. Their costs are going up, so they're actually, the amount of capture actually goes up slightly for them too. I'll scrub it down here again. Okay. So this is farmers as price takers. We are called, in Canada, most Canadian producers are price takers. We don't dictate what we get for our food. We might not even know what we get for months and months and months and months afterward. So I mentioned this already. The Loblaws and Metro and Empires, about 66%, and then altogether with Walmart and Costco, about 80 to 85% of the size. Retailers dictate the price. The middle layer provides services to producers, which takes money, the middle layer then, they take money out of the overall price to cover their own generally rising costs. And then producers at the end, we get whatever's left. And on average, farmgate prices for many producers has been stagnant for 40 years. And I'm still saying many, I can't say all, it's too much. I don't know, like there's still evidence coming in from all these sorts of places, but about 40 years is the time span that we're looking at. So what are retailers doing with their profits, right? Okay, so we've already, I think most of you have already heard that retailers are raking in record profits, especially since COVID. So it's useful to know where that's going. There's two main things, activities, which they're using them for. One of them is dividend payments. So this is when the company takes its profit and it divides that profit among its shareholders and just pays them directly. And then the other one, which is really interesting and really important and you should all look into and read more about, is stock buybacks. They're also known as share repurchases. This is when a company, rather than paying investors directly, it takes its profit and it buys out some of its own shares. It basically buys back some of its own stock. And what this allows it to do is it raises the stock price. It raises the stock price for its existing investors. So there was a metaphor on Canada Land about pizza sharing, which is kind of useful. You have a pizza, it's got 10 pieces on it. Everybody's got a piece, it's worth $1. One person wants to own more of the pizza. They'll buy out some of their friends and say, okay, I'm going to buy that back. And then as a result, the person who bought the more of the pizza now has a bigger share of the pizza. So the thing about stock buybacks is they don't benefit anybody except for the people in the company. They're really a useless activity from anyone else's perspective. And the amount of money that has been put into stock buybacks over the last several years is staggering. It's in the billions of dollars. For the first three companies I talked about, it's billions of dollars being put into stock buybacks. Some reasons cited by them for doing this, it raises the share price, it consolidates ownership, it signals confidence in the business to investors, and also there's some sort of tax incentives why people want to do stock buybacks instead of dividends payments. But basically, this is a huge chunk of their profits being invested in a way that benefits no one else but them. And this is at a time when grocery store prices are going up, producers aren't getting paid well, and also when grocery store workers have been going on strike to try and get better pay. And they have the money, but when you get into a room with people and you ask, how can we efficiently invest these profits? And you discover, well, if we invest our profits in farmers, we're not going to make any more profit. If we invest it in workers, we're not going to make any more profit. The only way that they can make more profit is by doing stuff like this. So this is what they're spending their money on. And this is a known issue. A couple years ago, 1 or 2 years ago, maybe even, I think 2024, the federal government put a tax on stock buybacks, like recognizing that this is an issue. And the tax is about a 2% tax, which is basically, it's a very small tax, so it's not doing anything. It does acknowledge that there's a problem, which is better than nothing, but it's not been effective at reducing stock buybacks. This is a picture of my little truck. I just thought, it's sort of the mood of sort of like dumping something uselessly because you're doing, I don't know. I thought that, I haven't even put into words how exactly it fits this, but it does. I think you can see that. Okay, so how we got here. What am I doing for time? Okay. So how do we get here? This is it's a massive issue. It's a massive thing that's going on. And I think, and for me, it took a long time to see what was going on and to see that what was happening in like our industry was actually in so many other industries at the same time. And part of the reason is that it's really hard to see this pattern because it's developed over so long. This is about 40 years. It's a long time, and it's been a slow sort of development, that decoupling. It's complicated by the fact that every year we have different yields. So like for me as a farmer, I don't necessarily see that things are getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, because for me it's just like, oh, last year was worse than this year, and the year before that was a little bit better. And so I don't see that the overall, like the graph is going like this and just staying here, instead of, it should be going like that, right? Also, the price information is hard to get. The second reason, which is really significant actually, is that there's a lot of fear of retaliation. So when I heard this at the AGM, I was like, oh my God, we know now, we know what's going on. I was so excited, like, let's tell everyone. And everyone's like, you can't do that. You can't just scream about this as a farmer, because if we do that, we will, you're going to poke the companies that control the entire grocery retail market. You're going to poke them. And so no organization can come out and be the first one to say this to the retailers, right? It's got to be everybody together at the same time, or else it's a big problem. And that's because when in these organizations, a lot of people deal directly with retailers. And if they're the ones who are coming out and making statements against retailers, well, they're putting their growers at risk, their producers who are already struggling, and it's not fair. So there's a challenge for farmers and producers to bring this issue forward because of this fear of retaliation. There's also fragmentation between commodity groups, and this was something I really learned about through a discussion with Massimo Bergamini, who's the head of the Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada. It's an umbrella organization that deals with all of the organizations in Canada, so he's a guy who knows things. And he is of the impression that all these different groups, we all believe that our problems are unique and special to us, and therefore that we have more differences between us than we have in common. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if we're all subject to the same pattern, we should be working together. And then lastly, there's this sort of the farmer's culture of resilience, which is a big thing. And it's good. It's really, really good. We are very resilient. We have lasted, anyone farming today has lasted these 40 years. They've found a way. We've done various things to survive. And it's very impressive, and it's beautiful. And we have these periodicals, Country Life in BC, great periodical, love it. I did kind of give up reading it for about a year though, because I kept having like mini panic attacks when I was reading some of the articles. And it was because it would say something like, here's a farm. They started farming like me, and they realized, well, they can't make any money in farming. So they started a co-op. And I'm like, yes, exactly what you need to do. Perfect. But that was really difficult. So then they also started a restaurant on their farm, and now they have an Airbnb on their farm too. And all these things, it's like, if this is what we need to do to survive, like, this is so insane. Like, I can't read this anymore. Like, these success stories freak me out, because it's like the level of complexity that we're supposed to handle, and it's just like we're supposed to accept that that's a normal thing that we need to do now. In order to have the privilege of producing food, I now need to have how many jobs in addition to farming? Like, it's ridiculous. It's the absurdity of it. Stress me out. Okay. And also, I mean, there's also a sense in which sort of young farmers like me, when we come out and complain at meetings, I do sort of have the wave of people come up to me afterward and tell me all the things I could do in order to survive. And it's like, I know. And I know that you survived, and it's very impressive, and I'm very impressed by it. But like, at some point, you just gotta like stop avoiding the problem and fix the problem and realize, like, yes, we're resilient, but how you can't just be resilient forever. When it gets crazy. Right, so there's been some cultural issues, I feel, have kind of held us back. Okay. So, survival strategies. What are farmers doing to survive? And so what I'm going to be kind of demonstrating is that many of the things that we've been doing to survive, not all of them, but many of them, are actually themselves creating new problems, undermining food security. So And the issue is that, of course, yeah, we're avoiding the problem that production doesn't pay, and we're adapting to the situation, and the adaptations themselves can be problematic. So there's one strategy which I don't see any downsides to, and that's the strategy of getting lean, so reducing your costs, and diversifying your operation. So diversifying, planting a bunch of different things so that, if one thing doesn't work out, you have another thing. This is a great strategy, and it's been doing us really well for a long time. I don't see any downsides to it. But there is a limit to how lean you can get. When you're doing that, like for us, we're doing all the work ourselves, it's a lot of work. At some point, it's like we got to reduce how much we're producing, because you can't get any leaner at some point. You can only cut your costs so far, and you can only diversify so much, because as you diversify, your operation also gets more complex, and the sort of regulatory frameworks that come along with that can give you a lot of work. And so it's a great strategy, but it's limited. The next strategy, which is a very common one, and it's increasingly common, is to get bigger. And getting bigger isn't necessarily a bad thing. Up to a point, it is not a bad thing. A family farm is still a family farm if it's farmed by a family. We have bigger family farms, smaller family farms, and they're run really well. So this is not a tirade against large farms. But when farms get really, really large, they accrue social costs or negative externalities, costs that are borne by society. One of these costs, this is a tendency, this one's a pretty clear thing. Social cost is that as farms get really, really, really big, they stop being owned by independent farmers, and eventually they become owned by corporations. This cycle has happened to a much larger extent much earlier in the United States, and in some sectors it is happening here or has happened here. That is a social cost if you believe that having people who own farmland and farm on it is a good thing. It is a good thing. When we have autonomy, when we kind of own and control our own food system. As corporate owners take over more land, they now control land that they aren't living locally to, maybe don't care about those communities, maybe they're not as tied into the food system and not as, don't have as much stake in it. The second thing, as farms get bigger, is that they tend to get a reduction in biological diversity. So monocultures, as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, tend to be more common, and that's because, there's a small farm and a big farm, there's actually no difference of the theoretical amount you can yield on an acre. So you can't make a difference in that sense. You can make a difference in cutting your costs and changing your management and gaining efficiencies of scale. And the way you often do that is through simplification and biological simplification. So that is a common cost. As you get bigger, you tend to get less biological complexity, and that has ecological effects and costs. In the long term, can undermine the viability of soil, that sort of thing. There can be an increase in environmental costs. So small farms use maybe there's a tendency to use a lot more labor-intensive things to reduce pests, whereas larger farms may rely more on chemical methods. Spraying, and there are environmental costs with that. There is some promise with technology, that technology can actually mitigate some of the increased environmental costs of larger farms. So that is good. But technology, which mitigates environmental costs, itself can incur social costs, because a lot of the technology is so capital intensive that it basically presupposes that independent farmers like me can't afford it. Like some of this technology, which is great, and I love the idea of it, but if I were to invest in it, I would not be able to pay it off for the foreseeable future, possibly forever, and I'll be in debt my entire life. So technology is part of the solution, but it has to be, we have to really think about the fact that it's very capital intensive, and it's not the solution for small farmers like me. Some of it is. Drone technology is cool. There's other ones. Okay, so as we get bigger, we get a lot of costs, we get a lot of problems. I think that there's some level of getting bigger, which is fine, but then you hit a point where society really starts to bear the brunt.
of what's happening. And we start to undermine the long-term viability of our food systems. So another strategy that farmers are doing is getting smaller. So becoming artisanal, as we say, the artisanal model. And that's when you get smaller and then you direct market, you can obtain more of the value of your crop. And so that's a real strategy. And that's good for the farmer, but for the food system, it's a reduction in production, right? So if we all go artisanal, on my land, we could produce a third of what we do and direct sell it, and we'd be doing well. But that's 66% of our production gone. That's like hundreds of thousands of pounds of apples that we're not producing anymore. So you add that up, and cumulatively, this model also is not, it's undermining our food availability here. We could produce non-food. Everybody who looks around the Okanagan sees that has been a strategy that has been heavily employed in this region. Non-food crops oftentimes are not perishable in the way that food crops are, like wine is storable. So, there's a lot of advantages economically to producing wine over food. So, people are going that route. It's good for them, it's good for tourism, but it's not great for our food system. Next, we could grow for export. And this one, I want people to understand that this is a symptom. The fact that we export food is a symptom, not a cause of us having a broken food system. When I go to government meetings, industry meetings, we're often, we're getting excited about opening up new export markets for ourselves. And that makes sense because it's sort of a silent acknowledgement of the fact that we can't make money domestically, so we better send all of our best stuff elsewhere. And we do. We send our best stuff outside of the country. You guys don't see it, unless you go to fruit stands and local good grocery stores like Tom's. But we do. We export a lot of our best food outside of the country because that's how we can earn money. Of course, for our food system as it is, that's not really a good thing, but it is keeping farmers alive. So I don't, blame farmers for doing it. And then the last strategy, is a couple strategies all in one, is adding a job to your job. And I've mentioned this before. The last census I checked, it was about 48% of farmers were using obtaining off-farm income and using it for the farm. So could be more, could be less now. So we often hear, for example, hey, if you're not making enough money, why don't you start processing some of your food? So for me, turning it into juice, turning it into dried apple chips and selling it, which we do. It's a great idea, but I do just want to point out that it means a huge addition of work. It's basically saying production is not enough. So just accept that and accept that you're going to do more work than your parents and your grandparents did and try and earn the same amount of money. For us, we used to have some downtime after harvest. Now, if we're processing our stuff, that is the time that we're spending processing stuff. Our downtime is gone. We don't have an off season. We are on all year long. And that really takes a lot of that can take the joy out of farming. If you're not the type of person who likes to work 100% of the time all the time. Or you want to do other things. So, agritourism is a particularly annoying one. I think it's great that there's agritourism. It's awesome. But we should have agritourism, and some people really make it work for them. The problem is not that we can have agritourism, it's that it's one of the options that we have to do in order to make money. So, agritourism, oftentimes the tourism season generally correlates with my busy season on the farm. So a lot of times we're already working weekends. When we're thinning apples, we're already working every day that the weather allows us to. If we were doing an agritourism operation at that point too, evenings are gone too. It's insane. It's a lot of work. So yes, agritourism is part of the answer. For some people it's great, but it's really annoying to be told that that's something that we should do because we just have to accept that production doesn't pay. Okay. So, again, all these strategies, they all work, but they all undermine our food system in the end. So agritourism, for example, if I were doing it, I'd probably have to reduce my production in order to not go insane. Also, burnout is a major issue when you have multiple jobs in addition to farming. I know that because I took a second job in order to earn extra income. And it was wonderful in many ways, but also a lot of work. Burnout is a thing. Okay. So now we're heading into the next phase. I'm going to provide an overview of some types of solutions, and then we'll move to the brainstorm portion, and I'll tell you what the format of that's going to be. So as far as types of solutions to this problem go, there's sort of broadly top-down solutions and bottom-up solutions. Top-down solutions are ones where we sort of aim for the power structure at the top and sort of figure out what we do up there. And we can have government-led solutions. So that would be things like the government enacts policies or legislation to deal with retailer consolidation. So like the Competition Bureau recently published a report which has a whole bunch of recommendations about what governments can do to try and get more retailers into the mix. That's a good document to follow. We could also look at stock buybacks. You know, we have this 2% tax. How will we make it a 99% tax? 99% tax. I mean, people have talked about outlawing it, but I think a 99% tax would be funnier. We can also conceive of things that would be led by the retailers. So if you're really into capitalism, you probably like this one. This would be like the retailers getting them to agree together voluntarily to do nice things for farmers and producers. We do have a precedent for this type of thing, which is called the Grocery Code of Conduct, which I believe, I'm not an expert in this, I believe it took about 10 years to get them on board. And basically, it's a voluntary agreement which the retailers join on to, and it's a regulatory framework which makes them do. Well, sorry, I heard thing. Sorry, I got. It's okay. So basically, it adds transparency into business dealings. It adds consistency into business dealings. It's things like you have to pay your supplier within a reasonable amount of time. You have to have clear communication about, you know, if you're going to reject a load that's given to you by a supplier, you have to have clear communication about why you did it. Communication has to be timely. It's sort of, it's about orderly behavior, orderly business behavior within, between suppliers and grocery stores. So that's what it deals with. It doesn't deal at all with pricing. But this voluntary code, which retailers came onto, took a really long time to come into being. So we might want to ask ourselves, is voluntarily asking them to do better going to make a difference? And also, if they do agree to pay farmers better, does that mean that consumers are going to pay more? Are they going to take it out of their profits? What do you think? Probably not. Also, the solutions that are, these top-down solutions that are led by producers, things like supply management. I am very inadequately prepared to talk about supply management in a large way, but supply management is essentially like things like eggs and poultry and dairy in Canada. We have these sort of organizations that dictate how much supply there's going to be, and there's quotas, so we know how much production there's going to be, and it's sold at a particular price. Supply management basically makes the price that farmers receive and the price that consumers pay consistent. And there's a lot of, people criticize it because they say, well, supply managed stuff is more expensive than it is in other countries where they don't have supply management, and that may be true. But it's also that consistency can be a really good thing. And like, for example, recently, egg prices in the United States have like shot up a huge amount, whereas in Canada they stayed steady. So there's some benefit to these programs. They need to be evaluated fairly, and I'm probably not the person to do that. But yeah. Marketing commissions are sort of a weaker version of this, where you have like an organization that comes into being to represent a producer group. And it can have various powers, like maybe it will do promotions, or it will set minimum prices, or it will share data, pricing data, to kind of help and just make the marketing of that produce orderly. And these things basically, they operate on the principle that when you get producers together into a group, you kind of make yourself bigger, and that allows you to kind of have more power in negotiations with the retailers. So marketing commissions have absolutely worked in the past to increase the returns of growers. My concern nowadays is that the power differential is so large that maybe it's not enough to work, but other people may disagree. The other one is mass simultaneous action. So I talked about earlier, farmer-producer groups all getting together and all saying something at the exact same time. So that would be great. Ultimately, though, I think I put my faith into bottom-up solutions. And what I think we all need to do is have a revolution from below. A revolution from below is just when people kind of come together and we all play our part and figure out how to create a system that we actually want and replace and ultimately displace the retailers. There's a lot of people who have imagined a lot of great things about this, and I draw upon so many people when I suggest that we kind of create this like network of interconnected cooperatives that distribute our food and retail our food for us. We create this system that replaces the retailers, and the goal is to provide a fair return to farmers, a fair wage for its workers, and keep prices down for consumers. And if that sounds too good to be true, well, I think it can be the case. I think it is possible. And ultimately, I also think that this would be easier to do if we started in semi-rural areas, like the Okanagan, like Vancouver Island, that have enough population to sustain scaling up. And then we work from there to move into the rural areas and remote areas. And that way we can build the food system we want in the areas where people are most vulnerable first, and then work on the cities. I think the cities are a harder sell for this because when you walk into a grocery store in the cities, there is like so much abundance and so much diversity. It is very hard to see that there's any problem with the food system, any kind of vulnerability. I mean, Vancouver gets a lot of its, 80% of its food is imported, like coming off the boat. So it's a bit of a harder sell to do this initially, I think. But ultimately, this is the way. This is the way that we actually build the system we want, we take it back, and everybody has something they can contribute. Some people have money, some people have time, some people have expertise. But we all just need to realize that we all stand to benefit from actually building the system that we want. Okay, so that's that. And I want to move over now. I think I want to have a stretch break. Everybody stand up and move around and wiggle. But so the next portion, I want to do community brainstorm. So anybody who wants to talk, has something to say, we can give you this mic. You can be in the video, in which case you're up here. You can be down here. It doesn't matter. It's up to you. And yeah, I'd love to hear every reaction or whatever. Everybody just while I get up and I don't know, move around. Thanks for the cough drop, Devin. Oh, thank you. We will go until about 8 p.m. You guys are, yeah. But it's all free time, open mic at this point.
It's fine, don't worry.
Let's take a couple minutes.
我刚好人家说类似的薪水会很快都。
It's good.
Usually my case, the pronounce it open air something. I was trying to think kaleidoscope.
That, and as you were talking, did it unannounced about 2 or 3 years after me.
I remember that now.
So if you want, I can put it out at
Come on.
Okay, I'll start it out. My name's Chuck Mitchell. I'm originally from the United States. I live in Canada and the Philippines now. I worked for U.S. Department of Agriculture 30 years in Vermont as an ag agent. Everything she said is spot on. I just came back from, I do organic inspections now in my retirement. I just came back from Washington and Oregon doing a bunch of small farms. Yesterday I came back and they're not really in any better shape than they are here. The problem is deeper than the grocery stores. The United States and Canada both have what they call a cheap food policy. They want consumers to have the cheapest food as possible. Why? Because when you have cheap food, I live in the Philippines. I've been there for 10 years. My neighbors, they spend 90% of their income on food. They don't go on vacation. They don't buy $200 shoes. They don't buy cars. So you got to have a consumer culture, you got to have expendable income. So this is, where the problem really, it goes deeper than grocery stores. It goes to government policy that is creating a system where farmers are kind of taking on the chin. Because they're sort of the willing people who will be the slaves, so to speak. The EU is a good example. The EU is 1/3 of the U.S. land base. It has 9 million farmers. The United States has 2 million. So the United States has 2 million. EU has 9 million. Why? It's government regulation that's creating an environment where small farmers can survive. So yeah, I think this is a great idea, the revolution. I think the two here is combining this one and the government. Forget the retailers. They're just being good capitalists, making money. Led by producers. I've worked all over the world in 30 countries. And there's only 2 countries where I've ever seen farmers who could actually organize together, Bolivia and France. And they're doing a little bit better, and I work in both countries. So the root is, and it's not an easy task to change government policy, but the EU's doing it, So I think a combination somehow of the government's got to get the message that farmers have to make more money. And maybe the consumer has to pay a little bit more. Before COVID, it was about, when I grew up in the 50s, my parents, in the 50s, was about 20% of the average family income was on food, 20% in the 50s. Before COVID, it's gone up a little bit more, but it was around 9 to 10%. It's the cheapest food in the world. It still feels expensive, but who's taking the suffering is the farmers. So I would say, you got to get on the government, and these kind of solutions also are good.
Anybody else? You don't have to come up here. It's up to you.
It can be.
Well, I have a question from one of your charts. The early charts that you put up. It looked like I was trying to think what was happening politically there. So things were sort of aiming at rising in the kind of mid-90s, it looks like. But something shifted in the early 2000s. So I'm wondering what that might have been, because on that chart on the left, it is really significant. So I couldn't remember what was going on politically, whether that was when world trade things were happening or if it was before that. And I was just wondering how much that has impacted everybody as well.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if you knew that or not.
I don't know that,
If
but
anybody else does.
yeah, if anybody else does. The only thing I know is that like the 80s was sort of Reaganomics, and that's when like a real big turning point. And that's when things really started to change, and that decoupling started happening in the 80s. That's also when share stock buybacks became legal. They weren't legal before that.
There was a
the
lot of
States.
deregulation in the 80s with Thatcher, Mulrooney, and Reagan. So they deregulated, they took those government policies that were there and got rid of many of them.
Right.
It's happening again right now.
Yeah, they deregulated, yep.
What might be helpful for that is a chart or comparator showing the rate of inflation. And so I'm looking at that, I'm seeing the price of bread going skyrocketing, but is that an aberration from overall inflation?
I believe it's been normalized. The graph, I could be wrong about that, but it took that into account. Yeah. It's not, yeah.
Yeah, like the increases in the price of food or comparison. Right, well, then that's the health issue to be, and if you're going to present that.
Yeah, there was the bread in particular.
No, I was just mentioning. Well, no, the Competition Bureau was very clear that there was price fixing going on by some of the ones that were listed earlier, and they later admitted to it. So that I'm sure there's a number of factors, but that one is a clear one.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Tom.
Just from my perspective, I guess I can resonate with everything.
Katie said, my name's Thomas. I'm a farmer in Summerland and a food distributor as well. And I think everything you said, Katie, just resounds with me. And I also spend a lot of time thinking about the problem. What is the problem? What is that one problem? And I can't figure it out. I actually spent 20 years trying to figure it out. And every day when I'm out there doing my work, I'm often thinking about it, and I can't figure it out. And it's not a simple problem. And I think we do need government support. So I'm really glad to see certain politicians in the crowd here. And I think there are creative solutions. So one of my ideas right now I've been thinking about is a creative solution might be something like, can we offer tax incentives, just like in a shareholder buyback scheme? It would be like, if we're marketing, branding, locally growing things, is there a way to track the authenticity of that local thing in the grocery store? And to somehow give consumers a tax incentive for buying local things and driving that consumption, that market for local through a tax incentive so that it encourages that local purchasing, and hopefully through some clever technology we can maybe find a way of tracking that consumption and passing that benefit through those taxes onto the farmers somehow. So I think technology could play a big role, but I really think government has to take the charge, because young farmers especially are really struggling. I'm personally really struggling. I think it's a very hard thing to put your heart and soul into something that is clearly super important and not see it change and just be facing the same struggle year after year after year. Throw in climate change, throw in pandemics. All these things are just thrown onto the farmer to endure and be resilient. And I don't think we can expect anybody to take up farming in the current state of our economy, our environment, the cost of land, and the general trend in the marketplace, which is, this lip service to support local, but at the end of the day, convenience is king, and most people will try to eat locally and then realize that, actually it's a lot easier to go to the superstore and just buy everything there. And maybe there is something local there, but probably not the majority of what they're buying. So, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, big kind of question mark for me is, I wish I understood more about what are the constraints within government? Like what can you do within government? It appears to me that increasingly the government is becoming like a disaster relief organization. There's just these continuing rolling crises, and they're diverting so much of their attention to dealing with those, which is why I think a lot of the revolution from below really has to start from people, but then engage government right away. For example, if you look at the history of women's shelters, like worldwide, everywhere where they've started, they've begun by women and their allies getting together and starting their own shelters because they were needed. And then once you have a shelter and you've established that it's working and that it's important, and that people are using it and wanting it, then you can ask governments for help, for sustained funding. I think that movement might have some usefulness for us here, in that I worry about waiting for government to do it, because they just seem so distracted. They just seem overwhelmed. And I mean, there's a lot of surface level stuff that's just so stupid that they're just embroiled in all the time. The figureheads. The actual government staff are very hardworking and overworked, and there's just so much hitting them all the time. So I wonder what they can do and what they can't do, and I'd like to learn more. But I think we can really engage government by getting them to fund the infrastructure we need to help through grants and building that sort of building the infrastructure, helping us build the infrastructure is one theory, I think. Yeah.
Hi, Dan Albus. Thanks, Tom, for the reference. The Member of Parliament. I certainly appreciate your presentation tonight. Can we give her another round of applause, please? So there's lots of things I can talk about, because there have been some changes to the Competition Act. There wasn't a lot of discussion around it in Ottawa because it was part of a budget bill. It was done by the previous Trudeau government. And quite honestly, and I wrote about it at the time, I did support it because, again, affordability is a really important thing. But the thing is, changing the market mix, where the Minister of Industry does have some tools, and some additional tools now after those changes, where they can say, you have to justify that this is actually good for the market, and not necessarily that you can use the explanation that by getting bigger, there's better efficiency for the marketplace. And that was the problem, because the bigger always got bigger under the old rules. No one ever said no. And that really is the issue there. But so that could take 20 years or longer, just because, again, those market changes only take place with decisions that happen to further consolidate. Now, with your idea about cooperatives, I've started a credit union caucus in Parliament, and partly it's because credit unions are not like big banks. They don't get the same kind of attention from the Minister of Finance. And the grocery code of conduct, by the way, is done by the Minister of Industry, versus the Ag Minister is the one that does all of the programs to support agriculture, particularly when disaster hits. So there's just different approaches because there's a different culture and a different ethos in each department. But for cooperatives, what I find when I speak to credit unions, one of the reasons why so many credit unions are actually organizing now and becoming federal credit unions, this is something that was done under the Harper government, where most of the time they're provincially regulated, and their provinces force them, because of their structure, to follow certain debt rules. And they couldn't break out and expand because they were only allowed to operate in a particular province. And I think the same thing happens with most cooperatives for food, for example. So perhaps a different structure at the federal level that would allow similar to credit unions, where existing co-ops could actually start to partner with one another and merge to create some strength. And we're seeing that in BC because in BC we have First West Credit Union, which we know is Valley First, and we also have Coast Capital, and a few others are looking at going federal because they just see that they can do more together in terms of being able to capitalize on the growth than what the province will allow them. So perhaps maybe we can have a discussion about perhaps what that would look like under a summer model. But anyway, thank you again for listening to me. I can ramble quite a bit, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here and learn about some of your ideas.
Thank you. It's the perfect venue for rambling. Thanks. Anybody else? Yes.
Thanks, Katie. Well spoken. Really appreciate all the information and so clear and helpful. I guess I have a simple question. How does it start? How can you start a cooperative? Is there any possibility of developing one in our local community, and how might that happen?
I'm just going to jump in. We just started a cooperative in December last year. So we formed a cooperative. It's a farmers network cooperative, and Katie is actually Devin is one of the directors, or you're also a director, I believe. So we have 7 directors that are food producers, and we have a total of 12 members now. It's roughly 55 plus acres of production and a diversity of producers. So I'm a vegetable producer, Katie and Devin are fruit producers. There's 2 other fruit producers, some apiculturalists, honey producers, and as well as a mushroom producer and an animal, small flock animal, diversified animal producer. So we have a footing, and we're hoping to build on that. So yeah, we are looking for more producers to join the cooperative. We've been so busy trying to establish a food hub, which is a processing and storage facility in Summerland, and we're getting very close to being able to confirm that. And we hope that this location will be a real hub in terms of connecting farmers, giving critical infrastructure to our region for processing and storage, and then of course giving consumers access to more locally produced goods, and hopefully developing new products that are lucrative for farmers too. So without adding too many jobs to farmers, but yes, there is a cooperative, and stay posted. We hope to be able to announce some exciting things fairly soon.
Yeah. So the thing is, we don't need to start a revolution from below because it is already happening. Like, it's basically we have to join the revolution that's already happening. There's cooperative movements on Vancouver Island. There's Tom's. They're happening all over the place already at a really low level. But farmers need non-farmers to join. We can't we can't all do all the work all ourselves, and we need people to support them in whatever way they can. And even if that means you do some of your buying there, and some of your buying where it's more convenient for you, it really, that's like, we need people to join the revolution, not start the revolution. So it is starting all over the place.
I have a question, and I'm not. Thank you. Oh man. Okay. My question, coming from a very grateful consumer. I've been a vegetarian since I was really little and grown up here, and it's such a great place to live because so many awesome people grow me delicious food, and it's something I'm super aware of. And then, so I have so many questions. Okay, one of the questions is, so for instance, apples, because I'm an apple connoisseur, and we buy them from different places throughout the valley, really. But when you go to the grocery store and they are so much more expensive, how do we make it work better for the farmers? Like, would it be better instead of different farmers having to operate their own spot? Like the apple barn and the different little ones. Would it be easier and more beneficial for the farmers to then work together and have one place where they're being able to sell their produce? That way, the way the fruit growers come up in Kelowna. I used to go and get tons of apples when I lived in Kelowna, right? And because I guess my question is, I was like, how do we help support the farmers? I go to the farmers market in the summer, but then when it's not there in the winter, kind of I sometimes stall out of like, well, where do I go now? Or how do I help? And how do we help, I guess, raise awareness for other people? Because I think that's the other part of it. And I wish I was technologically adept and passionate, and I am not. But I know that another part of it is, for instance, with your co-op, Thomas, is then getting people to understand that, like out in the rest of the community, that when you go and buy things from the farmers, it's going to go more directly to the farmers than when you go to the grocery store and buy it. Or, yeah, and then I guess my small other question, if you know it, is like, why when you've got, like let's say at the superstore, they'll have the local bin of apples during apple season, and they will be 99 cents a pound. And then they'll have all of the imported ones that are still $2.99 a pound. And it's like, well, why are you undervaluing our apples? Because they are awesome and they grew right here. Right, and that's one of the things that I don't know if that is something else that we as consumers can influence, is to say, like, how come certain food is being more valued than others, where it actually makes more sense than for sometimes farmers to maybe look at exporting it if they can make more money off of it just to survive, which is a bizarre thing, to sell our food away and then get somebody else to make it across the ocean and bring it back to us. Right? So.
Yes, you have reflected many important ideas and questions there. Would Denise want to respond? Sure. Okay.
You want to talk some more?
You go.
I'm from Summerland. I've been farming for 40 years plus. Came from Burnaby. And I had a dream about farming and the lifestyle, and I have it. But the reason why I came to Summerland, and it was just going to be the beginning of my journey after getting a diploma in food production. It was because the employer, the Barkwell's Cannery, hired me, and they were, I guess it was a provincial program, or maybe it was federal, and the government paid half my wages, and I ended up working with Barkwell's Cannery for a year. And then as things progressed, I got another job, and then I got married, and then I stay on the farm. I work. But this program to hire a new student and pay half their wages, it was a huge benefit to the farmer. And they were struggling at that time. The Australian fruit producers were importing canned fruit, and it kind of put the packing house or the cannery out of business because they were bringing in outside cheap fruit. So the same thing happened with our packing house recently. The costs were so great. The farmers got what was left over, but the costs are so great at the packing house level to run that facility. So that hopefully, Thomas, your fruit hub won't have that same experience, the cost of the building. But we need, so I don't know what percentage, you don't have a graph there detailing how many farmers per capita in the country. We're probably less than 1% of the population growing the food. And that's an important thing. And that percentage is how we vote.
Right. I think it's 2%. 2%. Could be wrong.
So we don't have any power when it comes to government policy. And I see Mark Carney is talking about investing in agriculture and infrastructure. Well, hopefully it's not going to be more of this. I mean, we have to kind of turn things upside down and nurture the young people. And the young people, such as you and Thomas, you need to be able to make a living. And I mean, historically, farmers, somebody always had to work off farm. There's never, it's historically, I think, few farms can manage with one income. Even the prairie farmers, they work at the liquor store or whatever, and they've got, I don't know how many thousands of acres that they have to plow when they come home. But somehow we have to attract more young people, and perhaps 1% going towards the young people's a pension plan. Maybe that would attract more people. I don't know what the answer is, and we are just a wedge issue when it comes to politics, and we only have a small voting power. So we need the consumer. That's what I was going to get up and say. We need the consumer to join with the farmers to help us.
Absolutely. Yeah, something I did want to say about government again is if you go on like the government websites and try and figure out like what is our agricultural policy here, you'll see like a whole bunch of different categories, and you'll sort of be like, okay, what is our policy? What is our mission statement? What is our mandate? Farms are businesses, and we kind of don't have a policy in the sense that it's basically, there's an assumption that the market will kind of decide, and so we have to adapt to the market. And that's sort of how, and so government comes in a series of budgets, and those budgets go toward kind of two things. One of them is business risk management, and these are really important and awesome programs. I'm a huge fan of them. I wouldn't be here if we didn't have these programs. One of them is subsidized crop insurance, and the other one is called agri-stability. And agri-stability, you enroll in, and if your margins drop, I think below 30% in a year, due to forces beyond your control, then it'll trigger like a payment to you in order to prevent you from going bankrupt. And it's a really, really important program. And the limitation of these programs, I mean, there's a number of like little micro things we could say about them that maybe they don't work so well nowadays. But they're really good programs. They're really well designed as well. But they're tied to market value. And our market is heavily distorted. So it's kind of keeping us on life support. And that's, I guess, better than nothing, basically. So these programs, the structure of the programs themselves are really, really good. But because they're tied to market value, and market value is itself distorted by the shape of our system, it's really limited. I believe personally that we could change a lot by having government set a policy, which would be to set a target for food production. So earlier I talked about that, 48% to 34% in BC, we've gone down. Like, can we set a target, a measurable target, for 75% within 10 years? We're food sufficient by 75% within 10 years. I think that having a target that would be measurable would force government to change the way it funds things, because it would have to prioritize food. Right now, it often prioritizes the amount of gross revenue on the land or whatever, and that's what it funnels its money into. I think it would change things. Oh, I got lots of interest here. I think you were first. You talked already, and then pass it behind you to Kirsten.
So I'll give you the experience of Vermont. I was there 30 years. I originally was from Pennsylvania. Vermont's a very progressive state in a lot of ways, and in agriculture, they have very friendly policies compared to Ontario. So when I moved as a farmer in Vermont, I went into shock when I moved to Ontario. Why is Vermont, it's a small state, why is Vermont progressive? They have 40 towns in Vermont. Of those 40 towns, 35 have at least one farmer on the select board. They make a concerted effort in Vermont. Select boards are 3 people. They really work hard to get a dairy. If it's a dairy county, they want a dairy farmer on that select board. If it's a vegetable area like southern Vermont, they want a vegetable farmer. So part of the reason why Vermont has some amazing on-farm slaughter, all kinds of stuff that I could do in Vermont. When I moved across the border to Ontario, it was just like I was arrested for killing a chicken. And so the secret was government. It was having a farmer on those select boards. 40 out of the 43 have a farmer. So that's the secret of Vermont.
Just behind you.
Thanks, Katie. This is so interesting, and hearing what everyone in the audience is saying is really valuable, so I really appreciate everyone's insights. I just have one small minor point about the fact that maybe we have very small population of farmers, but we have a huge population of consumers who are voters, and I think right now we're in a very special time where our population is in the mood to do things to build Canada. And I think if we can develop policies that support Canadian agriculture, that value doing things better, leaning into the true story that our system of supply management has helped us to have smaller poultry farmers that have protected us from the avian flu in a better way than we've seen in the States. I think our population is very open to these stories right now, and I think if we can build, lean into building things in a better way, this is the right time to do it. So people are listening, people really want to feel national pride, and if someone just has a vision of building things in a better way, voters are listening. And right now, a lot of the times they've been up till now hearing stories that government regulation is bald and grocery prices must go down. An alternative story that is backed by a plan, I think, is it's well timed.
Yeah, just to follow up on some of the things that have been said, I think there's a real need for a food policy from the federal government in particular, because they have more control with respect to a food policy. I think the focus in the federal government has been agriculture as a business, in particular an export business, because let's face it, they really don't see BC. As far as the federal government is concerned in agriculture, it ends at the Rocky Mountains because the value, the export value, is on the other side of the mountains. So I think, and as Kirsten has just said, there's a real appetite now for this type of thing. Let's take advantage of it and really push for a true food policy that values food production rather than exports, because I think that's the real dilemma within the government with respect to agricultural production.
All right, interesting perspective.
Yeah, I'll grab that.
Great.
So I was actually just thinking about, as we've been talking, and I think we touched on something really critical, is the convenience factor. You know, people are producing food, they're getting it to food hubs, but it's that final sort of destination between the consumer and the producer. And I was just thinking about this, we live in a day and age where there's decentralized taxis. So I think most of us know what Uber is. You can get food, you can get groceries. That network just needs to extend directly to producers. So creating a chain of transporters or a system that farmers basically can sell their food directly to the consumer in an easy fashion, I think would be a worthwhile endeavor to maybe pursue or just have as an ideation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start by begging forgiveness if this is rambly or uninformed, because I'm a rambler and perpetually uninformed. But I'm reflecting on the need for a consumer level groundswell sort of outside of the system other than acting as a consumer. So, there's these local organizations of producers that are starting to form things. There's government that could do something but doesn't care unless there's a groundswell of popular support for it. And as was reflectable, I think, Christy, the storytelling need of it. And for the vast majority of consumers, their only contact point with the narrative of this system is when they're in the grocery store, where the grocery retailer is in control of the narrative being presented and very intentionally trying to put up all the, local grown apples, and these tomatoes were farmed by Farmer Phil. Here's Farmer Phil smiling next to our CEO. And on top of that, I feel like changing a consumer level experience of the narrative, perspective on the narrative, is really hard when the injustice of the system is so complex, when the injustices of the system are so intentionally obfuscated by, say, it's really hard to find pricing data over time. And coming from the United States, I feel that one of sort of the shortcuts to engaging popular interest is by, in cases like these, highlighting the injustice centered on, the people who are most perpetrating and profiteering from it, the CEO and the board. And if there's 3 companies with 60 to 66%, there's probably 3 CEOs and 3 boards. And as the old saying goes, they have names and addresses. And so I wonder, to what extent a storytelling that before trying to present the complexities of the system to build understanding, a storytelling tactic that tries to first get people engaged with that visceral sense of injustice, that is it okay if I curse?
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Okay, so a messaging of Galen West is one of the CEOs, right? Galen Weston. Galen Weston is fucking farmers, he's fucking Canada, and he's fucking you over. That, and then put his little $10 billion or whatever net worth underneath that, and engage that visceral feeling of injustice, and then also, have those who are profiteering from injustice, if they don't feel the personal shame, at least they might start to feel the waves of shame directed at them from people sort of realizing what they're doing. So yeah, just curious how storytelling and strategic story crafting might play a part in it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. Let's do both. Let's do all. Let's do all the things. I think, there's there's 2 things. There's 2 directions we can go, and you have to go both directions at the same time. And one of them is, burn down the problem, right? Just set it on fire in this way that you're talking. And then the other side is build something beautiful. And just build it so stunningly beautiful and amazing and awesome, and then invite everybody to see it, and then inspire jealousy, which is the other human emotion we want, positive jealousy, good jealousy, oh, I want that too. How can I have that? Yeah, so I think that the 2 prongs are really good, and you have to do both. And the building the beautiful thing,
it's kind of more labor intensive. And like it's a slow and steady thing, and you have to have everybody on board. But then if you have that potent message, that like the burn it down aspect is really important too. No. Good.
I'm a consumer, been around forever, and I've got lots of family that have been in agriculture business forever. And in the 60 years I've been seeing farmers in Manitoba, and the 10, 15 years I've been around here, I can't believe that people still grow food in Canada. Someone else commented, you have to have subsidiary income coming in, or complementary income coming in. That's nothing new. That's been around for at least 40 years in my experience. And that's just, I can't believe that that's supportable. Which leads me to a question. Where are we going as a country? Where are food producers? It's a non-viable non-viable career. How people can continue forever to take inadequate income and to just give just so people can eat. Eventually it's got to collapse. And I'm an apocalyptic type of dude. I worry that until such time as there is a collapse, there's not going to be a political will to make a change. And that's what I worry about. When I see that flat line for 40 years, I mean, it hasn't affected anybody yet. We're still happy to go to, the grocery store and support Galen Westing and his ridiculous fucking profit margin gouging. One comment I'll make on my friend here's comment, which was very articulately made, by the way. The producers can't be involved in that, because if they try to generate any push against the shitheads that are controlling the retail, they'll get squashed, either directly or indirectly. And when you start pushing people with money, they use their money to push back. And when you're talking billions of dollars, you're talking some pretty heavy-duty pushback. And I wouldn't put anything off the board for Galen Weston producing his billions and billions of dollars. If he felt that was in the way, I would be gone. So I see that's not a producer solution to that problem. That's got to be a consumer solution to that problem. And until the consumers see the problem, which they don't, that's the challenge. And in the interim, I think that your comments about like alternative methods of getting distribution, such as wherever Tom went to, is, like locomotive is the way to go. And if we can make things like that as a groundswell, that's a great way forward. But it's not a solution to the big problem, because I see, not very informed, but arm's length observation, that the system is going to collapse before we can fix it from the ground up. That's my concern.
Dark.
It's apocalyptic.
Yeah. No, I do. This generation, I mean, we already see, this generation, children are growing up malnourished, and then the next generation is the one where people start starving. I mean, it is really serious. I'm also a doom and gloom person. I say that I'm a realist. Some people might call me a pessimist, but I think I'm a realist. And that the trends are dark. The trends are dark for sure.
So I just want to give people a 10-minute heads up. So if you have any burning questions, definitely get them in there. There's been a lot of great discussion.
Hello, my name is Bill. I'm a farmer here in Summerland. I grow vegetables, and I also do markets. And my biggest thing I see is teaching the public the cost of farming and how much we actually have to make to make a living. Because I don't know how many people come to me at the market and say, that's too much. Why is that so much? And, I don't charge a lot. And I'm like, well, that's a fair price. And they're like, no, so I can go to the grocery store and get that for half the price. So I think the biggest biggest hurdle will be educating the public. Because it happens every time I do the markets.
The food value isn't in what's in the grocery store compared to what you have.
Well, I know that, but general public does not.
Yeah, I hear ya. We sold. There was somebody who was buying a box of apples from us a couple years ago, and we were offering $2.50 a pound. We're going to go hand pick you the most excellent box of apples you ever had, organic,
for $2.50 a pound. And they got back to us and said, well, I can get that for $2 a pound in Lake Country. And it's like, okay, you're going to drive for 2 hours to avoid paying me $10 or something? Like, be my guest. And I have let that live rent-free in my head ever since. And I haven't been able to let go of it. Honestly, it just like frustrated me so much. So I understand.
I was just curious in terms of, the important talk about consumers supporting with their votes the limited 2% of farmers and their voting power. Is there much of the sense, like, in the various political parties' platforms of, which party should consumers support to support farmers, either at the provincial or federal level? Or, like, I guess I'm just curious, perusing parties' platforms, I don't tend to see a lot of pertinent information there.
That's a really interesting question. Personally, my experience, I haven't been around that long in the scheme of things, but I don't really see a great difference between how we're actually treated between the parties.
That's what I was afraid of.
There's maybe difference in the talk, but yeah, in terms of a lot of food policy really is provincial, and I don't really see any difference at all. Well, that's not true. Maybe it's not true, but it's not as much difference as you might hope, I think. And I think it is Denise's point that we're such a small portion of the voters that, pandering to the farmers or what's good for the farmers isn't necessarily top of mind in political platforms. I'm not really sure. I voted. I won't tell you what I voted.
So going to the people that are already in process working towards the food hub, at what point would it be worthwhile for myself as a consumer to be say, I'd like to be a part of this? How? The part can be somebody buys the food.
Yeah.
Is there a way to support the co-op idea?
Yes. Yeah, so the question, is it possible to support the co-op movement as a consumer?
This
Yeah.
specific one I'm talking about, that's...
Yeah.
Because I've been reading about it, but I keep thinking, well, that's great. Finally, I'll have a place that I want to actually buy everything at.
Yeah, I think approach the board and offer your name. If you know other people, get together, because and then basically offer whatever you've got, which is probably time or expertise or whatever, care, love.
I suppose, what about memberships?
Yeah.
Just $10 or $20 or $30 or $40 or $50 membership. We will commit to, purchasing your and help you get it started.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah, some sort of support network is great.
I'm sort of involved in that co-op, and I don't know if it's changed, but there is potentially going to be like investment shares, so like membership options for people that aren't producers. So yeah, you can just like keep your ears and eyes open, like when the ball gets rolling. I don't know if that's still on the part of the plan, but it was part of the plan to have like a kind of investment type membership for community members that want to support the project. Yeah.
Because he said, make a beer project. And I can't think of anything better. Someone gets on these states.
Yeah. Yeah. I lived in Berkeley, California, and there they have these amazing grocery stores called Berkeley Bowl and Monterey Market, and it's just stunning array of stuff. And it's because they bring in all the local stuff and just like amazing grocery stores. And there's such a beautiful thing. You go there and you're just like inspired by it.
Well, they can grow for 3 seasons though too.
Yeah, for sure. That helps them. But that's something too. So again, the farther you get from urban centers in BC, the less diversity you get. And a lot of that is actually coming from the retailers too. They don't want to put too many things on their shelves. They want a limited number of things. And so there's a lot of we really want more biological diversity. You want a lot of different apple varieties, but pressures from the retailers themselves, they only want to buy a few varieties of apples. And if you've got this variety planting, your trees are super healthy, they're doing really well, too bad. The retailers don't want that one. And they tell us it's because the consumers don't want it. But there's a lot going on there because part of it is that oh God, I'm going to get in a ramble here. Am I in a ramble? What about Spartans? I love Spartans. I love.
So I'll give another example from Vermont. They have a very powerful group. You look it up, called Rural Vermont, and we talked about the farmers being 2% and the consumers being 100%. Look up Rural Vermont. They're a very powerful organization in Vermont. It's a consortium of farmers and it's one organization of farmers and consumers. They have their own lobbyist. I was involved with them when we were trying to change the raw milk laws. So, Rural Vermont has their own lobbyists. They do go to legislature representing the farmers and the consumers as an organization. It's a very interesting organization.
Joel Saladin is?
Joel Saladin is in New York, I think. But anyway, Rural Vermont's an interesting consortium between farmers and consumers, because that's where the strengths are, right? Both. So look them up. They're a very interesting organization.
So I have a question or a thought that I hope maybe turns into discussion. I know we're running out of time here. And I'm glad to know as a consumer that there are many different ways that we can be involved in purchasing, not only locally, but more directly being involved with the co-op and looking at hopefully legislation and policy change. But in educating the consumer, as you brought up, how can we get this messaging and these ways for consumers to get involved out there to more consumers?
Adrian knows.
I was going to think about this. So, thanks, Katie. This has been really nice. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Can't hear me? I love when people say that they can't hear me. Thank you. Sticky messages. So, my name's Adrian, and I grow your food. Right? This is Devin and Katie. They grow your food. Over there is Denise. She grows your peaches, some of the best peaches you've ever had. Jen's back there. Jen taught me how to farm. She grows some of the best cherries you've ever had. Her and her family have acres. You've now met us, and it's now your responsibility as consumers to say, I met a farmer, and we have to do everything we can to support them. And that's the only sticky way to get these messages to stick, is that personal connection in those stories. And that is the only way, Katie, you as a linguistics person, you fully understand this. It's all about the cultural stories that bring people together, and we've always been brought together by food. And our current political systems don't value food. So we have devalued food that other countries currently have. So you go to Korea and they would pay $5 for a cherry, or $5 for a peach, or a beautiful pear. And they share that with their friends as part of an experience, but we have devalued our food here in Canada so brutally that it is now just a commodity and it's no longer that piece. So when we have these conversations of, I've met a farmer, this is my farmer friend, they grow your food, they're the ones that feed us. Did you know that Katie only gets 40 cents a pound to grow her apples, and it actually costs her 41 cents a pound to grow organically, which means she is funding your meal, and she can't even afford to eat herself. And that's the messaging we have to start having. It's not a pity message, it's a reality of facts.
Powerful.
Is that all? That's great. John.
Sorry, farmers and this. My apologies, I don't want to.
I was sitting here and it reminded me of a joke I heard on CBC, on Peter Zosky's program. And it was a Saskatchewan farmer, when lotteries first came into being, he won $3 million. And they asked him, what are you going to do with your $3 million? And he said, well, I can probably farm for another couple of years. One of the things that I do is I write a column for the Penticton Herald twice a month or so. And last week, the column was about grocery stores, and I think the gist of it was that grocery stores are rigged. Part of a couple of paragraphs in it was that bananas forever have been 79 cents, 89 cents, and that's just the price they are. Pre-pandemic, mushrooms were $3.99, and all of a sudden, well, $4.99, and now $5.49. And I can't imagine the cost of production of those mushrooms has escalated by those same percentages. So there's something evil in the grocery store system there. I wake up at 2 o'clock every morning dreaming about what I should be writing about in my next column. And the thoughts that's going around in my mind is we have crises. We have climate crisis, we have housing crisis, agricultural crisis. Everything seems to be a crisis, and that to me indicates that the system is broken. We have a free market, laissez-faire capitalist system that has worked for a long time. But I don't think it works anymore. The people it works for is what I call it's ownership capitalism. If you own your own home, if you own investments, if you own a car, you're probably doing quite well, and the cost of living doesn't really affect you that much anymore. But for people who don't own anything, there's little prospect of them getting ahead. So if you're a young person nowadays, the cost of buying a house is just stupid. And I don't know why that is, but I think the system is broken. The corporations have, there's an imbalance of power there between ordinary people and workers and corporations. And what we're especially seeing in the United States is the imbalance of these super rich people. So I'm hoping that somehow this is going to change. If you look back in history, the way that our society has developed, we've got rid of monarchies, we've got rid of serfdom and slavery, and I'm just hoping that somehow we can muddle our way out of this situation where we've got into this imbalance of power and the system just doesn't work for us anymore.
Thank you, John. So I'm going to wrap things up. John used an important word there. And the word he used is stupid. Stupid is a good word because I think what really brings me here is absurdity, the visceral feeling of absurdity. That if like an alien being were looking down on our food system, they would think, wow, this is really dumb, guys. And so in light of that, I asked you guys to do the mindset shift when you came in here to imagine like it's actually possible to change this. And I actually do think it is possible to change this. I really do. Because the odds are so much in our favor if we can get people to understand. If we can get everybody's being screwed by the prices. We know that. We're being screwed. It doesn't feel good to be screwed, right? It doesn't feel good. Okay? Now you know that the farmers are being screwed too. The workers are being screwed. We know that. Everybody's being screwed, except for a small group of people. And if we can all of us unite and understand that we're on the same team, and that there are teams here, there are battle lines that are easy to draw, like we can actually get everybody on board. I do actually believe that is true. Even if you don't, I still think you should join the revolution. Okay? And here's the motivation. regardless of whether you think it's right, regardless of whether you think it can happen, doesn't matter. Fight to the death. Okay?
We all have to eat.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, everybody has to eat.
Everybody's got to eat. You got to fight for what's right, regardless of whether you think it's possible to do, because that's the right way to live. You live with honor. Right? Strive towards the beautiful and the true and the good. That's just what you do, because that's an exciting way to live. Laying down and behaving as if you can't do anything. Not an exciting way to live, okay? Huzzah!
Huzzah!
Okay, thank you so much for coming. This is
object stalk, that a voice came from it. Not a voice, but something that was able to reach her mind.